The Ready, Set, Grow podcast is sponsored by Ag Expert, software designed for Canadian agriculture. Visit them today at agexpert.ca.
Welcome to the Ready, Set, Grow podcast, where we interview innovative leaders and people from the agriculture and food sector. Today, as always, we have our wonderful guest host, Diana Laternis from Farm Credit Canada and Regina. Hi, Di.
Hi there.
And we're really excited. We get the chance to visit today with a great leader in agriculture, Jay Bradshaw. Jay, welcome to the show. And for those that don't know you, can you give us a little bit of the Jay story, where you're from, and how you progressed up to the ranks to become such a influential leader in Canadian agriculture?
Yes, sir, Ken, and good morning or afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the compliments, Joe. But first, I want to acknowledge what RH Accelerator is doing, Joe. You and your colleagues out of London, Ontario, bringing entrepreneurs, innovators, and investors together, creating a wonderful community. So thanks for doing that, Joe. It's making a big difference in the industry. Well, the J story is probably pretty short, but I consider myself a pretty strong Canadian, having lived and worked in various parts of Canada. I'm born and raised in the eastern townships of Quebec. I am bilingual by Quebec standards, maybe not by Parisian French standards. And actually, my Zoom background is kind of the area where I'm from in Quebec, the Appalachian Mountains. I went to the University of Guelph, so I'm kind of a exploratory kind of a guy. So I went to the University of Guelph, and I'm an OEC 82 grad. That kind of dates me, doesn't it? And then when I graduated to continue the adventure, I'd never been in Western Canada, to be honest. So I accepted a position with Monsanto in 1982. They want to know if I want to go back to Quebec because I was fluently bilingual. I said, I'll go anywhere in Canada that you need me. So where I ended up was Rosetown, Saskatchewan. I had to look at a map, and that's where I went. So I started my career in Rosetown, Saskatchewan. Fell in love with the prairies, to be honest. That whole west central part of Saskatchewan is just a wonderful part of agricultural land in Canada. So I was a territory manager for a couple of 3 years there in west central Saskatchewan with Monsanto. And I went back to University of Saskatchewan, and got my MBA, which I still think stands for Missing Business Acumen. But I got my MBA, and after my MBA, I accepted a position with Cyanamid Canada. So that was based back in Markham, Ontario. And of course, that's where Joe and I were on the same team for a little while after your time with First Line, Joe. Mm-hmm. So I spent 10 or 12 or 13 years with Cyanamid. The last number of those years, I was head of that business for Canada. Then in 1999, a lot of amalgamations were occurring. So BSF Global bought all the assets of Cyanamid globally, including Canada. So my former team and myself at Cyanamid were acquired by BSF. And I thought, well, that's the end of my career for now. But that didn't happen. I ended up heading up BSF Canada, the new BSF at the time, in around 2000. So I stayed at BSF for a couple of years and put the integration of Cyanamid into the BSF organization together. A very successful organization, still is today, of course. But then in 2001, I took a bit of a switch and I became the president of Syngenta Canada, based in Guelph, Ontario. So from 2001 all the way up until, I guess, technically my retirement in the summer of 2018, I had 17 and a half great years as the president of Syngenta Canada. Naturally, like all ag businesses, 80 or 90% of the business was in the prairie. So throughout my whole 36-year career, I spent way more than half of my time in the prairies just because of the magnitude of the agriculture. So technically that retirement, I have to use that word. I'm not the kind of person to sit at home or, golf and fish or do Sudoku or crossword puzzles. So I really had no plans when I retired from Syngenta, but the phone rang pretty quickly. And although I was on part-time already mentoring some young ag tech companies, some good friends and colleagues of mine that I've known for decades, John DePutter gave me a call and said, Jay, we're contemplating starting a private equity company for agriculture. Well, that resonated really strong with me because I thought in my retirement days, I'd like to give back to the community that was so grateful for my career. I wanted to give back to encourage the next generation of entrepreneurs and innovators in the ag industry. So the private equity thing really resonated well with me. So to make a long story short, myself and John DePutter, who everyone would know in agriculture, he's a phenomenal gentleman on the commodity experts, Mike Perovich, and his colleague John Lancic developed the Future Transfer Systems. They sold that organization to Univar several years ago. Ironically, they just bought it back. But Mike Perovich and John Lancic, all of us got together and started getting a little bit of traction on this new private equity company called Ag Capital Canada. We certainly wanted and needed a Western Canadian-based member as a general partner with the other four of us. That person became Greg Andruko, a very, very successful ag entrepreneur in Alberta, developed a massive retail organization that he sold to Agrium. So that's what Ag Capital is. It's five of us as general partners. So myself and John DePutter, John Lancic, Mike Perovich, and Greg Andruko. I had some good contacts at FCC. We know what FCC does for this country in agriculture, just a phenomenal organization coast to coast. But FCC was looking for, part of their mandate was to spur on innovation in agriculture in Canada. So when they heard about us, five guys getting together, kind of quasi-retired people, FCC encouraged us and was very interested. To make a long story short, we formed a private equity company formally as Ag Capital Canada. And in concept, we sold limited partnership shares. So FCC is our largest limited partner of Ag Capital Canada, to the tune of $12 million. The five of us as general partners were invested personally, to the tune of $4 million. The uniqueness is the balance of the funds came from an agricultural network across Canada, large farmers, large producers, guys that sold their quotas or whatever those ambitions. And the idea for these limited partners is, where do you invest your money today? Well, agriculture is still a very, very sound investment. So we're pretty pleased where Ag Capital Canada is today, because all the limited partners, including FCC, are all from agricultural backgrounds. So my ambition has been fulfilled in my retirement days. It's a great vehicle for me personally and my colleagues at Ag Capital to, guess what, encourage that next generation of ag innovators and entrepreneurs. I wish I'd started this 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, but it's never too late. So I feel like a 20-year-old again, to be really honest, because there's so much innovation and so many entrepreneurs across Canada in ag and ag food that need just a little bit of help, a little bit of mentorship. And of course, they all need capital. That's what Ag Capital is all about. But our real mandate is not only to supply capital, is to supply that mentorship, leadership, provide the network that we've created over decades and decades to help these young companies. So I'm in a really good spot, I got to say.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Jay. That's an interesting career that you've had. Can you tell us a little bit about the projects that you work on at Ag Capital, like some of the neat innovations or early stage companies that you're mentoring, and what are the neat things coming out of this?
Yeah, and it's full spectrum, Diana. We say ag and ag food, which you guys know is a very broad category, right? Now, when I put my Ag Capital hat on, it's not so much early stage. It is a private equity company, so we'd like to see some revenue generation. It can be an early stage in that, but we're really not a seed level investment company. So revenue generating. The hidden criteria, to be really honest, is unless one of the five of us has a really lot of knowledge, acumen, and network in a particular sector of ag food, we're not going to invest. Because the idea, of course, is we can contribute to their boards and help them mentor them. But the investments, Diane, that we've announced, I'll leave it at that for now. One's aquaculture out of the West Coast is called Poseidon Ocean Systems. They not only develop the infrastructure for aquaculture, they develop all the growing environment. They call it flow pressure for oxygenation. So it makes salmon farming much more sustainable and of course, more economical and profitable for the salmon farmers. So that's one. Another we announced is called Soma Detectives. So I'll call it an artificial intelligence play in the dairy science area. So through each individual cow can be monitored through machinery, the milk that comes from each individual animal you can analyze with optical sensors the somatic cells, content in the milks, not only for the traditional things like fat and protein and everything that's important, but the big salient breakthrough that we hope that they have that way is you can actually determine the state of pregnancy of that animal. Of course, if you're dairy farming, that's absolutely critical. So that'll bring phenomenal efficiency to dairy producers. The third one we announced is called Farm Health Guardian. It's really an enhanced biosecurity mechanism or vehicle. I'll call it geofence, a hog barn, poultry barn, or wherever there's biosecurity concerns and needs, and it automatically monitors the coming and going of everyone from those barns. And if there is an outbreak of any kind of disease in poultry or hog barns, anonymously, it notifies the appropriate people that they choose to notify so we can contain a disease if it breaks down. So those are the three, Diana, we've announced, and we've got 2 or 3 other term sheets out there. So it's kind of, I'll say, soup and nuts and egg.
Good for you. Well, it's exciting. And you guys have assembled a pretty remarkable team, a lot of talent there and experience. So those companies are really lucky to have you guys engaged with them. Jay, we work with a lot of farmers and a lot of agribusiness people and a lot of young founders. And I wouldn't mind just getting some thoughts on, leadership and entrepreneurship and even farming from you. Thoughts on, things that you've accumulated on how to become a great leader, how to get stuff done, how to move things forward. Can you talk a little bit about, your style, how you handled challenges, some of the leadership lessons and things that, helped you become such a great results-driven business person and executive?
I could certainly try, Joe. I don't know if I formally did anything or just fell into it, to be really honest. But I think when the underpinning rationale is that I've always respected people that know something that I don't. I mean, that's a broad statement, but it's absolutely true. And if you think about it, that's absolutely everybody I've been in contact since I started my career when I was 22 and still on an ongoing basis. You can always learn from people that know something that you don't. Now, some things aren't very important, but I've always had 2 ears and 1 mouth for a very good reason. I always learn from other people. And when you understand what they've contributed to your learning, you can always constantly foster and nurture that. So it's kind of a very broad principle. The other one I'd say is I've always respected my elders. And that's for the very same reason, too. I learned a lot as a young man. I'm still fairly young, but I continue to learn from people who have experiences ahead of me. And that's what I want to pass on to the next generation. The other thing I'd say, it's a broader goal for me personally, Joe, but I'll say leave the world in a better place than you came into it. Well, that's a grandiose goal, but my point is every little step of the way, whether it's on a sales team 40 years ago or a marketing team or leading an organization that I did for the last 20 years, is that everyone has a role. Everybody individual, regardless of your responsibility, regardless of your level, you can actually make that team or that organization better. So just keep doing that throughout your entire career. And I'd say when you get into a leadership position, there's lots of definitions around that. Mine's pretty simple, to be honest. I think managers do things right. Leaders do the right things. That's completely different, right? When you're in a leadership position, you have a lot of responsibility and accountability. But your goal is to inspire your organization, your team with a vision, with passion, and one that they believe in. And not one that they just believe in, but one that they help co-create. I had the easiest job in the world, Joe, as president of Syngenta. All the great things we did in that organization, the culture that was developed, all I did was listen and learn and nurture the people around me. And I'll say underneath me, and I'm very complimentary when I say underneath me. It was a facilitator role that I really did. So I don't know if there's any magic in what I'm saying. It's just be congenial. I think attitude is absolutely everything. But yes, underpinning, like a lot of farm kids, work ethic is pretty important too. I have a very, very strong work ethic, but I only go as fast as the team will let me, meaning you got to surround yourself with good people. But I like to share too, Joe, whether it's me today or a young entrepreneur just starting out. And I wish I had done this, 40 years ago. I do it today. But always admit, if you don't admit it, acknowledge your weaknesses. But if you're an entrepreneur, an individual, let's say, that's got a good idea or a good technology, there is no way that you can commercialize that all by yourself. There's absolutely no way. You're either strong in marketing or sales or technical or R&D or finance, but you cannot do all of that as an entrepreneur. So early in your career, early in your idea, is find someone like the RH Accelerator or an incubator that can provide all those resources that you don't have. The first thing I would do as an entrepreneur is go in by yourself, pour yourself a drink or a cup of coffee, whatever's appropriate, and truly be honest with yourself. What are my strengths as an individual? And what do I have to associate myself in areas where I don't have that strength? And with time, you'll be surrounded by a community or a team or whatever stage you're at. And that's no different than being president of a large company. I always hired my weaknesses, and I had so many. That's why I had to hire so many people. I have a few strengths, but they weren't enough to manage a company as broad as Syngenta Canada. So whether you're starting out, just acknowledge your strengths, obviously, but also acknowledge your weaknesses and always pursue to fill those gaps of your weaknesses. So I think that's probably the best advice I can give anyone, regardless of your stage of your career.
I think that's really solid advice. And, I know you're a sports guy, and oftentimes we'll use a sports analogy, like a basketball team. Are you a point guard trying to play center? So, just really understand, if you're tall, go under the basket and play center. If you're short and fast, you probably want to play point guard. And it takes a team. Absolutely. You could be LeBron James, but five high school kids are probably going to beat you in a game, right? Because there's more of them. So
that's right. Well, Joe, from our experience together, I'll say it's Santa because we were together. We always pulled the goalie early, meaning full offense. Today, to pull the goalie last minute or two, in concept, we were pulling the goalie. There was 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
Let's just go for this thing.
That was all out,
It was.
Good experience.
It was successful. And I like to have a lot of fun. I'm a sports guy, especially hockey. I would use expressions in front of my large organization, Syngenta, that some so-and-so or something, nope, they didn't have their stick on the ice. And it's a simple concept, but you can't skate around a hockey game without your stick on the ice. You're never going to receive a pass. You're never going to score. And look at some of the highest statistics in sports. Babe Ruth has the strikeout record of all time. He also has almost the home run record too, right? So you got to keep trying and never give up. I think you got to have that tenacity, and don't ever accept no for an answer.
Those are really good insights, Jay, and really good learnings throughout your career. Appreciate those. Now, can you give us a little bit of insight into, some agriculture trends or things you're seeing in the industry, or, what's coming in the future that you see in the ag and food space, just from your perspective?
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on, of course, Dan. You're privy to them, Dan, as well. But, there's a statistic. I think it's around 40% of the jobs in the future haven't even been created yet, right? So for young people, entrepreneurs, keep your mind wide open, because your job 10 years from now hasn't even been created. But be more specifics in ag. Of course, the whole pandemic COVID thing has kind of cautioned us all, right, from economy point of view, from venture capital investment, et cetera. So I think the sourcing funds and money is a little more challenging today than it was pre-pandemic. That's one thing for entrepreneurs or startup companies or early cycle companies. But I do see another trend too. There's a proliferation of really good technologies in ag tech, whether it's artificial intelligence or machine learning. But the applications of those tend to be a little bit narrow, and that's okay. As an individual entrepreneur or small company, you have a great idea in that machine learning AI type space, but really you need some entity or some help in integrating your small, narrow scope of what your application is with others, make it certainly a viable concept. So one trend that's happening is a lot of large organizations, I'll use layman terms, they're building platforms, holistic platforms that are available to a large grower audience, regionally, globally, and otherwise. And they're offered to these smaller companies is they will offer to take your narrowly focused technology and plug it into a larger platform so that one platform can be expressed. So whether it's growers using a Trimble system or a John Deere at their control center, they're constantly putting in other apps, I'll call it, onto that main platform. Because what the large growers or any grower wants to do is have one interface, one platform, and access to all the tools and utilities it needs. So I think that trend right now is developing very rapidly. And I think that's really good for young entrepreneurial companies because there's no way they can develop a narrow concept of full commercialization on their own or find a route to market, but they can plug in through API and other vehicles into a well-established platform. So I see that as an absolute trend. Of course, again, because of the pandemic, there's an acute desire to try and substitute or replace manual labor in ag and ag food processing, right? Just because of the exposure. So you see an accentuated demand and need, and we're involved in this in Ag Capital Canada too, for mechanization using optical sensors, again, artificial intelligence or machine learning to, I'll say, replace the human intervention that's required in food processing lines as an example. That kind of technology is being adopted very, very quickly, very rapidly.
Any other kind of last thoughts before we let you go, Jay? I'd like you to say, and we had Keaton and Abby on the other day. You might want to just give a shout out to them as well. We're really excited about what you're doing with UCO.
Yeah, UCO is kind of neat. They do predictive and analytics to predict disease and nutrient and insects. And I really enjoyed that ride. They're very young guys. I kind of adopted them, I'd say, personally and professionally 3 years ago. But they're doing really well because beside a retail model, and they've also developed analytics as a service. And some very large global companies now have signed on with UCO because despite their resources as large companies, UCO is much smaller, much more nimble organization that can develop algorithms in 30 or 60, 90 days. So it's nice to see them not only having a retail model that offers grower protection in their field, but also, I'll say, selling analytics as a service because they're quick and nimble. I will say, I mean, these comments are general, Diana and Joe, but when the economy recovers, and it will, we all know that. I just think again, agriculture is such a phenomenal place. Absolutely. If you think how the agricultural industries or even individual farmers or companies, relatively speaking, haven't been impacted that much from the pandemic. Every other industry, every other economy of the world, including ours in Canada, has. And I just think there's a hell of an opportunity to just leap and bounds off that very, very strong fundamental agricultural platform that we have in Canada. I would draw everyone's attention in the industry. Don't forget about the agriculture industry as the rebound, the old K curve, but the rebound in Canada could very well be the agricultural industry platform. I strongly believe that.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty excited with commodity prices where they're at, and you're right. We've been disrupted so much. Last farmers kept farming, and some parts of the food chain and channel have been disrupted, but not to the extent of, say, airlines or hotels. So yeah, we're pretty excited. Any last comments? We've seen some pretty big money invested recently in Farmer's Edge and Amy Yoder's company, Anuvia, down in the U.S. I think the markets are actually agreeing with you that ag is a pretty sexy investment sector right now.
Well, it is. I mean, you look at TELUS Ag, what they're doing, right? I mean, that's a huge for a telecommunications company to invest, and they've acquired 6 or 7 companies. As you know, put those together. Farmer's Edge just did their IPO. So again, I think the general financial markets that don't understand ag are seeing and hearing all this great news about ag, and they're trying to find a vehicle to get involved.
Even Deere sales are up like 28% or some darn thing. So I think
there you go. And again, back to my little team at Ag Capital Canada. That's why we're getting solicited by some very large venture capital organizations that don't understand ag. They want to join Ag Capital or buy a limited partnership because we can be the filter to find those opportunities for them. So ag's in a great space. And my last comment, Joe and Dan, is just to call out for farmers. Just say thank you. You know, what we hear in this pandemic is the heroes are the frontline workers. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Even, I like this, truck drivers. How did our food get around? It's truck drivers. But the one that, to me, in addition to those other two categories, is farmers. They kept us fed, safe and abundant food supply in Canada and all around the world, all through this pandemic. So I think for growers, grower associations, individual farmers, you're the heroes too. And we need to compliment them and thank them for what they've done during the pandemic. Equally, in my mind, the frontline workers.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jay. And the agriculture industry is just surviving and thriving, and it has a lot to do with all the people in it. You know, passionate about the industry, passionate about where it's going, and we just keep driving forward. And it's exciting times, I think.
Great time to be in ag. And we need more people coming in ag. Don't worry about your background. Come on in. It's a great place.
Great points. Jay, if people want to connect with you, Ag Capital Canada, you know, the website and you know, you're on LinkedIn and Twitter. Do you want to pass those out to people? And
agcapitalcanada.com is pretty straightforward. My email's in there, and all my colleagues. I am on Twitter to Joe's point, just Jay Bradshaw, and Instagram. But yeah, reach out. LinkedIn. Just reach out. I've got lots of extra time these days, and I'm still helping a lot of informally, a lot of young entrepreneurs. Love to help and share my experience and share my network if I can be of any assistance to anyone.
Well, thanks for being with us, Jay. This was fun, and we'll have to do it again. And congrats on Ag Capital Canada and all the companies you're working with. Thanks, Diana, and we'd like to thank all our listeners for checking out the Ready, Set, Grow podcast. You can find it on rhaccelerator.com. Just click on the link of the podcast at the top. Also on YouTube and also on the other major podcast streaming applications. So until next time, we'll see you soon. Bye now.